We haven't shared a bed in 5 years. He walks away every time we fight. I'm exhausted, but it wasn't always like this. From the outside, we might look like just another long-married couple. 20 years together, a small family business, and a child we both love. But behind the polite smiles and the daily grind is a truth I've hidden for far too long. I feel more alone now than I ever did when I was single. And lately, I've started asking myself the one question I used to be too afraid to say out loud. What if this marriage is over, and I'm the only one still pretending it isn't? During my 20 years of being a wife, I never thought that one day I would sit down and seriously write down these thoughts. Things I had tried to keep deep inside, thinking that time would ease them. But after 5 years of sleeping separately, after so many times of silently swallowing tears to keep my children with both a father and a mother, I began to realize there are cracks that cannot heal on their own, and there are gaps that cannot be filled. At first, there were a few petty arguments. Then he moved out to sleep separately, saying it was to have space to rest. I silently agreed, thinking it was only temporary. But then, day after day, month after month, year after year, that room became his own world. No words, no sharing, no warmth between husband and wife. While I lay alone in the old room, still trying to keep everything peaceful, still forcing myself to smile and laugh in front of my children, he became more and more distant. Since when, I can't even remember the last time we slept next to each other. I no longer feel like I am being hugged, asked about, or simply listened to, like a wife who deserves respect. Every day, I wake up early to take care of the market, business, take care of my children's schooling, manage every meal, every little profit. Yet, when I come home, I have to face a void. Not just the empty bed next to me, but the void in my heart, in my marriage, in all the expectations I once placed on the man I call my husband. I used to think that sleeping separately would eventually heal, but 5 years have passed. The conversations have become less frequent. The hand-holding is gone. The eyes looking at each other are cold. Sometimes I try to start a conversation, ask him if there is anything he is not satisfied with, if he wants to fix it together, but he just mumbles or silently turns away. That feeling, the feeling of being abandoned in my own life, torments me every night. At first, I tried to convince myself, for the sake of the child, endure. I worried that the child would lack a father, worried that the child would be hurt if he saw his parents separated. But the more I lived in that coldness, the more I felt my heart breaking. The child needed a warm home. But would that warm home still be meaningful if the mother lived in loneliness, hurt, and resignation every day? And then I asked myself, a wife, if for 5 years she was not hugged, not shared, not loved, then who else would she be? The coldness of an empty bed is not as scary as the coldness in the way people treat each other when conflicts arise. And for me, the most painful thing is not the arguments, but the way he chose to leave, leaving me behind with all the chaos and burdens of life. He always had a strange habit. Every time my husband and I disagreed, instead of sitting down together to talk and find a way to resolve it, he would pack up and leave. Silence. Disappeared for days, sometimes a whole week. No messages, no calls, not a single apology or explanation. As if it was a given. If he was angry, he would leave. If he was not satisfied, he would disappear from this life, no matter how I tried to cope. We were a small business, with no workers, no one to take over shifts. When the market was crowded, on holidays when everyone was jostling to shop, that was when he would leave. I was alone, busy setting up the stall from dawn to dusk, selling while taking care of meals, children, and having to swallow my tears because of anger. Not because I was upset about the argument, but because I felt so alone in this marriage. I wonder, would a husband who truly loved his wife have the heart to let his wife bear everything all by herself just because of one displeasing word? Many times, I didn't know if I was being a wife or working for someone who always had the right to leave whenever he felt tired. While I had no right to be tired, no right to be sad, I used to wait for him to come back after the arguments, hoping that this time would be different, that he would understand and change. But no. Every time he came back, he was still the same, indifferent, cold, not a word of admitting his mistake, not a bit concerned about how hard it was for me, without him by my side. I gradually realized that his abandoning me when we had a conflict was not just a sudden outburst of anger, but his way of refusing to take responsibility as a husband. He chose the easy way for himself, and I had to bear all the hardships. And a marriage, if only one person tries to keep it, while the other is ready to let go at any time, is it still a normal relationship, let alone a happy one? I started to no longer be afraid of the times he left. I just felt sad, not because I lost him, but because I used to think I needed someone like that in my life. I thought that after so many years of repeating the same cycle, conflict, him leaving, me silently enduring, it would be time for him to understand that a man cannot keep hiding whenever there is a family crisis. But I was wrong. It happened again, right when I needed him the most. Just over a month ago, business started to enter a busy period. I was almost exhausted from having to prepare goods from early morning, receive customers until late at night. It was so dark, not to mention worrying about the children's education and taking care of the house. But just because of a word that I didn't have time to choose, a very small disagreement, he packed his things and left, without a moment's hesitation, not caring how I managed with the pile of goods and daily responsibilities. I remember very clearly the feeling of that morning. Instead of hearing him help clean up the shop or prepare the cart to carry the goods, I only heard the door close behind me, cold and silent. He disappeared. Not a single text message asking how he was, not a single word of advice. The market was crowded. I had to sell goods and look after my child because he had suddenly missed school that day. My hands were shaking as I counted the money, my mouth forced to smile at the customers, while my heart just wanted to sit down and cry. I used to think I was used to this, but no, each repetition only deepened the wound in me. People say husband and wife are to shoulder the burden together, to overcome hardships together. But in this house, I was living like a full-time employee, and the owner was ready to leave at any time if he was not satisfied. I didn't know what I had done wrong. I only knew that every time I was tired, I found myself standing alone in the middle of the market, in the middle of my family, in the middle of 100 things to worry about, without my husband by my side. He came back a few days later, as if nothing had happened. He didn't ask me how I was doing, didn't mention whether the business was going well. The first thing he said was, "Are you still angry?" As if I was the unreasonable one, the one at fault. At that moment, I smiled faintly, not because I forgave him, but because I no longer expected anything. When feelings have been trampled on too many times, they don't die from a big shock, but from each small cut, repeated until there is no more feeling. I began to understand that every time he left me, he hammered another nail into the closing door of our marriage, and at some point, that door would never open again, even if he wanted to. After the last time he left, I was no longer angry, nor sad, nor hopeful, nor waiting. I just felt strangely empty inside, as if I had just dropped something very important and could never find it again. Perhaps what I had dropped was my faith in our 20-year marriage. We got married when I had just turned 20, the age when women easily believe in the promise that just loving each other is enough. At that time, he had nothing in his hands but determination and sweet words. I followed him, leaving behind my youth, ambitions, and other choices, to build a home that seemed stable. We started a business together with a small stall, then gradually built our own shop. Money is not abundant, but enough to live, enough to raise children, enough to repair the house. The economy is considered stable, but the more I live, the more exhausted I feel. No one can see an unstable family. On the outside, there is still a husband, children, a thriving shop. I still smile at customers, still chat with neighbors, still try to fulfill the role of a good mother, a good wife. But at night, within the four familiar walls, I see myself as a shadow, faint, invisible. No one needs me. Even the person who promised to hold my hand until the end of my life no longer remembers that I am still present every day, trying with every breath. I turned 40 with a haunting question in my head. What do I live for? For my children? Maybe. For my family? Maybe. But what about myself? Am I still a true woman with the right to dream, the right to be loved and protected like everyone else? Or am I just a tool to maintain the family image for my children and society to look at and think, okay? For the past 20 years, I have devoted almost everything to my husband and children. I ignored my own interests, refused friendships, told myself to save, to know how to sacrifice, to endure for the sake of peace at home. But the more I tried, the lonelier I became. The price of resignation is an emotionally exhausted soul, a heart with no room for joy. I used to fear that 40 was the beginning of aging, of a life of contentment, but now I think differently. 40 is not the end. It can be the beginning. If I am brave enough to look back at myself and ask myself, how many years do I have left to live true to my feelings? I have been silent for too long. I have become accustomed to turning a blind eye to the hurt. But after all these years of living like a shadow in my own home, I began to wonder, do I still want to endure? That question kept repeating in my head, especially after long sleepless nights, silently staring at the ceiling and finding no warmth in that seemingly solid marriage. I thought about divorce, not in a moment of anger, not because I wanted to escape to find someone else, but because I wanted to find myself again, to feel alive again, not just existing. For the past 20 years, I had lived like a soldier on duty, always in a state of endurance, always having to. I tried my best for my child, for my family, for the image of a good woman. But is that fair to me? I used to blame myself for being selfish when I thought of the word divorce. I used to feel guilty towards my child, towards both sets of parents, towards everything my husband and I had built together. I used to tell myself, try a little harder for my child. But the truth is, I cannot teach my child to be happy if I am always miserable. A depressed, resigned mother, living in a heavy atmosphere, can she pass on joy to her child, or is my resignation teaching my daughter to accept injustice in married life? I do not blame my husband entirely. He also has good points. Sometimes he loves his child and fulfills his financial responsibilities. But in a relationship, if only one person holds on and the other lets go, sooner or later that string will break. I'm tired of holding on to a life that my companion no longer wants to walk with me. I need some breathing space. A life where I can live as myself, gently, without fear, without always having to force myself to be a strong wife. So if someone asks me, is divorce too much? I just want to ask, is living like this, enduring like this, not too much? Maybe I will get a divorce. Maybe I will choose a very different path. Not because I don't love my husband anymore, but because I have learned to love myself. Maybe I will walk away with empty hands emotionally, but I will have a whole heart again. I will no longer live in the days of fear of another tantrum. I will no longer wonder, will he come back after every argument? I deserve a peaceful life. And if this marriage can't give me that, then maybe it's time for me to walk away.